Hi, my name is Kevin O'Connor, and today I will be presenting my fantasy football database. So to start out, let's take a look at our data model. So what I have here is the crow's flip diagram for the tables within my database. I have 8 tables: players, stats, projections, health, status, my team, teams, and rankings. And we'll start by looking at the players table. So the players table contains information on the player ID, player's first name, last name, their position, what team they're on, and their number. And basically from here, we map to several different tables. So if we want to take a look at stats next, stats holds information on the player ID as well, their yards, their total, their TDs, their turnovers, their points, and their rank. And these are all stats over the course of the entire season. So our mapping here is going to be a one-to-one mapping from players to stats based on the player ID, because each player can only have one set of stats, and each set of stats needs to have one player, and there has to be one for each. Even if it's all zeros across the board for the stats, they still need to exist, which gives us our one-to-one mapping. And we can also take a look at health, which was also a one-to-one mapping for similar reasons, but health takes on a player ID, their status, whether they're injured or not, the type of injury, maybe a sprained ankle, and their outlook, how long they're out. If they're healthy, it'll say will play. If they're out for 2 weeks, it'll just give information like that. And so this is also a one-to-one mapping, as each entry in health needs to map to a player, and each player needs to have exactly one health status. Next, we can take a look at our projections. Projections holds information on the player ID, their projected yards for the coming week, the projected TDs, turnovers, and points. And we also have a one-to-one mapping here. Each player needs to have a set of projections, and each set of projections can only have one player, and needs to have one player. So one-to-one, and then our status. So our status is going to hold information on the player ID, their availability, whether they're on a different team that exists within our league, and which team that would be if they are on one. And once again, one-to-one. Each player needs to have one status, and each status needs to have one player. So that sort of covers our one-to-one mappings at the start here. Oops. And what we have next is our team. So my team is a table that only holds a player ID. We can get the information we need from our other tables in the database, but this really just stores the players that are on our current team. And this table will initially be empty as we add players to it. So as you can see, the table can have 0 players. It starts out empty, or it could have many, however many your league rules permit you to have. And what we can do is our players table can then will then map either 0 players that doesn't really need to be on here, or it'll have one team. So each player could be on the team or it cannot, which creates our mappings here once again through the player ID. Next, we'll take a look at teams. So teams holds information on all the teams, the opposing teams that are in our league. So it'll have the name of that team, the record, the projection, on which team they might be playing in the next week. And this will map to our status table, because our status is the one that actually holds the information on, which team a player is on and if they're available. So a team listed here will map to a team here. Each team in here can have 0 players or many, much like our team can, and each player in the status table can have 0 or 1 teams that it's on, much like our table, which creates this mapping. And then our last is going to be rankings. Rankings are based on the team rankings, based on the record. So we'll just hold our name, rank, and record. And this will be a one-to-one mapping. Each team gets 1 rank and one ranking, and each ranking needs 1 team. And this is the basic design that I used for the database. So now we can actually go ahead and take a look at that database. So this is a starting page. As you can see, my team is initially empty. This will change obviously as you add players into it. But we'll display our team. We'll have information on the first name, last name, position, team, health, projection for the next week. And there's actually an option to cut the player, which we'll get into once we start adding players to our team. But say when we were trying to add players, we can start by sort of filtering the position. So if we first want to add a QB onto our team, what we can do is we can filter, we can select QB from our drop-down menu here, and we can submit, and this will generate a report right below of all the QBs in the league. And this report will be ordered actually by each player's ranking, within their position. So Josh Allen would be the best QB currently ranked in fantasy. Justin Herbert would be second, and so on. We'll go down. What we can do with this information, you can see Josh Allen, he's on Buffalo, he's healthy, but he's actually currently taken. So he exists on another team. So we want a player that's available. So what we can do is we can go down on, our second best player, second top ranked player here is available, Justin Herbert. So if we want to check out his stats to see if we want to add him, what we can do is we can use this view tab. And what this will do is it'll open up a page with the generated report of all this player's individual stats. So we get a full report here. What we get is, you get his rank. He's number 3 QB position, total yards for the season, his total TDs for the season, his total turnovers for the season, his total points for the season, projections, and so on. And so if we like what we see, we could always just go back and add him. But I also want to talk about this feature here. So obviously, week to week, these numbers for total yards, total TDs, total points, and even the projections are going to change. So what we have here is the ability to sort of update any stats that we would need to update. So say, Justin Herbert gets, 100, 150, 200 yards. We'll say he gets 200 yards next week. What we would do is we would update it from 4821 to 5021, add 200 to it. Say he throws for he's projected 4 TDs, say he throws for 4 TDs. We'd want to add that to our total TDs. So he'd be at 19 total TDs on the season. His total turnovers are 11. Say he doesn't turn the ball over. If he doesn't actually have an update, he doesn't throw a TD, he doesn't have a turnover, we don't really need to necessarily update this information. Each entry here sort of acts as its own transaction. So these will update even if this one is left empty. So we can do, total points. He might go up to, say he gets, 20 points. He'll go up to 298.32. And then, his projections would change accordingly. So, he got 200 yards last week. He's projected 192. Maybe we can keep him at 192. That's a pretty accurate projection. 4 TDs. He got 4 TDs. Maybe he's playing a tougher defense. He's only projected 2 TDs. And he's projected, 1 turnover again, for a total of, 18.5 points. However, these points would be calculated in the league. Is how you would calculate these projections and total points. So, with that, we have our information. We insert. Stats are updated successfully, and it'll bring us back to our page. And if we really want to check and double check and make sure those stats are in, we can view Justin Herbert. As you can see, his total yards went up to 5,000, his total TDs went up to 19, his turnovers stayed the same, and all of these projections changed, from 4 to 2, stayed at 1. Yeah, and so now we like what we see. We like Herbert. We can go back to our page. We can filter our QBs. And what we can do is we can add him to our team. So this add will actually insert Justin Herbert into my team table. So we add, it's inserting a new player. His numbers, player ID is 4. And here we have him. Justin Herbert, QB, he's healthy. He's projected 18.5 points this next week. And similarly, we can do the same for, running backs. Take a look at who's healthy. Derrick Henry, he's available, but he's hurt. You might not want him. And we can check out all these reports for our different positions. And this table will actually, this My Team table is actually organized by position. So if we insert, Jonathan Taylor, he'll go right below the QB, and any other running backs will be grouped together with him. Wide receivers will go below that, and so on. And that's for the basic functionality of inserting, deciding which players you want to go into your My Team table. Now what we can also do is, say Jonathan Taylor, he's only checked at 10.2 points. You might think someone else could do a little better. So we can actually cut players that, maybe we don't want to play that week. And we'll look for someone else. So if we want to cut Jonathan Taylor, this will delete him from our table. And similarly, we can also cut, Justin Herbert. And that's sort of the basic functionality of getting players, viewing their stats, adding them to a team, cutting them from your team, etc. Now, what if we have a new rookie that comes into the league, and we need to add a player into our database, an entire insert? What we can do is we have insert a new player here. So basically, we're going to insert them using their player ID. Each player needs a unique player ID, first name, last name, position, team, number. So say we want to insert, a new player. We can come up with a unique ID that I don't believe has been used. First name, Jahan. We'll use a familiar Penn State player. We'll say Jahan Dotson. He gets drafted this coming year. He plays wide receiver. He gets drafted onto the we'll say the New York Giants. I'm a Giants fan. And then his number is 5. So this is basic information for our player table, and what we can do is we can insert him in, and a transaction will occur. So the transaction will actually insert him into the players table, as well as his stats, his health, his outlook, or his status, and his projections, because those are all one-on-one mappings where each player needs an entry in each of those tables. And we know the values for those tables because he is a rookie, so he doesn't have any stats. So, he'll be inserted with zeros across the board. He'll be, ranked last, and then we'll be able to update all those stats as we go along. So if we want to insert here, you see a new player created successfully. We'll go back, and what we can do is we can filter. We can go to our wide receivers, and here we have Jahan Dotson. New York Giants, he's at the bottom because his ranking is the worst, and likewise is ordered by ranking. He's healthy, he's available. We can view his stats, and it'll be zeros across the board because he doesn't have any stats currently. He's just a rookie. He needs to play his first game, and once he does, we can update these accordingly. And so that's the basic functionality of my database. Adding team players, deleting players, inserting new players into the whole league via a transaction. Oh, I forgot to mention, with this transaction, rollbacks can occur. So say we reuse an ID. I know one's an ID that's already been used, and we want to insert a new player. We'll go with Sean Clifford. He plays QB. His team is, let's say he goes to the Patriots. Number is 7, or his number is actually 14. But so basically, player ID 1 already exists. So this would actually cause a rollback because we can't have a primary key that already exists within our database. So as you can see, it'll say player ID already exists, and you'd have to try inserting with a different one. If we go to QBs and we submit, he was not added. So, you know, that's the example of a rollback with our transaction here. You know, if any of the tables fail or if the player ID exists, it'll roll back, it'll catch an exception and roll back. And what we can do is we can actually take a look at this in our code, in my code. So for this, we'll go to our insert. So this is actually the code where we insert a new player. As you can see, this is where the transaction begins. So what we'll do is we'll begin our transaction and we'll try to query all of this data and commit. And if this occurs, it'll commit, and a new player will be created successfully. But if it doesn't, it'll catch the exception. You know, if one of these fails or isn't able to do its job, and it will roll back and say player ID already exists. That's for the number one reason why this would fail, because these are sort of all default values you can see. But basically, if there's a player ID that already exists, it'll throw an error because player ID is a primary key and it needs to be unique. So this query will fail and we'll catch that exception and roll back. And that's sort of the functionality that's for transaction and inserting players into the database. Lastly, I'll show you some of the select statement, which will generate a report. So this is my select statement join 5 tables. There's actually multiple ones that I think join 5 tables. If we scroll down here, this will do the same. And even in my view, we're gonna when we display stats on all players, we're gonna have to join most of the tables to get all of that information. So this is a basic functionality in my code and the database itself, you know, allowing all this to happen. So thanks for listening.